Hello everyone, welcome back to Rewired with your host Khadija Farosh. For those of you just joining us, this podcast is all about differentiating between fact and fiction through exploring our teenage minds and psychology. Now I don't want to spoil the rest of the episode, so I want you all to sit back, relax, and enjoy. There's a very specific moment that a lot of us might know. You might be minding your business, doing something extremely thrilling, like reading or reorganizing your desk or eating, and then you open your phone. Suddenly, everyone you know is apparently having the best night of their lives, and the lighting is good and the outfits are coordinated, and you weren't invited. Or maybe you were, but you said no because you were tired or busy or just didn't want to go, but that doesn't matter at this moment because a question still pops up in your head. Am I missing out? FOMO, or the fear of missing out, is today's topic, and we'll be talking about why it exists, why it tends to affect teenagers more, what it does to our minds, and what we can realistically do about it. At its core, FOMO is the feeling that something socially significant is happening without you, and that being absent puts you at a disadvantage. It's the fear that missing out equals losing something important, whether this be belonging or reputation or a moment that could shape the way people see you or how you see people. And psychologically, it includes two processes, and these are perception and compulsion. The perception of missing out is that understanding that a socially significant event is taking place without your involvement, and this is typically followed up with a compulsive behavior to maintain these social connections. And while these behaviors don't present in the same ways for everyone, there are some common manifestations, and these might include things like compulsive checking, and this could be in the form of refreshing stories or scrolling or reloading messages, or even asking questions and prying in conversations. And these often manifest due to the anxiety that comes with FOMO because it is, of course, a fear of missing out. And with this typically comes overthinking. Now, our last episode was about rumination and overthinking, so if you didn't listen to that one, you should probably check it out for some more context. But in this case of FOMO, people typically tend to overthink the social meaning of the situation. So, why wasn't I invited? Are they becoming closer without me? Do they even like me anymore? And most of the time, these are overestimations which rarely ever apply to the reality of the situation. This often leads to a loss of personal value or self-esteem and creates hyperbolic, exaggerated narratives to fuel the fear. Another third manifestation is suddenly hating your own plan. So you may have been perfectly happy reading or resting or doing nothing, but the moment you see others together, your own day feels lackluster. And one may then begin to experience a comparison and inadequacy phase, which is basically feeling as if their life or experiences aren't good enough, subsequently experiencing a sense of dissatisfaction with the way that their life is going, mainly socially. Fourth and finally, you tend to agree to things that you don't actually want to do as a manifestation of FOMO. It pushes you into saying yes out of fear and not desire, and this overcommitment in avoidance of regret often leads to significant burnout. Because, of course, it is unnatural to force your mind and body to engage in social interaction at these constant rates, and it eventually becomes unhealthy, both mentally and physically. Now, why does it actually happen? FOMO isn't really a modern invention, despite the fact that the acronym was created sometime in 2004 and it is commonly used now. It's not a consequence of, our generation or the digital age, even though social media has reinforced a lot of FOMO patterns. It is a biological evolutionary response that technology has augmented and turned up to an almost maximum volume. So thousands of years ago, being excluded was a sign of danger, rather than, the social awkwardness or worry that it creates nowadays. And during this hunter-gatherer era, you needed your group to survive for a lot of reasons. And in consequence, your brain still acts like this today. It's still wired in this way, so when you do see a friend or a group of friends together without you, your threat system switches on as if it were a response to danger like it was during this era. Your brain also tends to react more powerfully to potential loss than to potential reward. so loss tends to feel stronger than gain. Missing out feels like losing something, even if that something is just an experience that you weren't planning to have. And this satisfaction that you gain you would have gained if you were experiencing what you initially missed, would not have equated to the dissatisfaction that you would have experienced in the case of missing it. And this is why symptoms of FOMO tend to feel more visceral than the pleasure that you might experience after a social event that you enjoyed or were present for. Another reason is that social comparison is instinctive. So generally, social comparison is considered an innate and natural human tendency, which is described by psychologists as a fundamental drive rooted in our biology and, of course, evolutionary history. As you may have noticed, there is a lot of evolutionary intersections in psych. So, social psychologist Leon Festinger proposed the social comparison theory sometime in the 1950s, which suggested that humans have an inherent need to evaluate their own opinions and abilities, especially in the absence of objective standards. So essentially that means when a lot of people have differing perspectives or abilities or opinions, humans innately feel the need to push theirs against others, compare theirs against others, evaluate their own against others. And also from an evolutionary perspective, comparing status and resources and abilities was a crucial survival mechanism because of the fact that early social groups were formed as a form of survival. So it helped individuals at the time understand their place and role within the group and determine their capacity to address and meet the challenges at the time. And so this wiring still exists in our brain today. So when you see someone else's life looking exciting, your brain automatically wonders how you measure up in comparison. Another reason is attachment patterns that intensify this feeling, and I do intend on doing an episode or a mini-series on attachment styles and their psychological significance. You may have come across them on social media before, and I don't want to go too much into detail on them here, but in simple terms, if you're someone who worries about people leaving, or someone who tends to experience relational anxiety or problems with potential abandonment, FOMO tends to feel bigger. And if you're someone who distances yourself when overwhelmed, who avoids anxiety-inducing situations which at times may need to be addressed, you might pretend that you don't care but still feel it internally. So FOMO taps into the exact same systems used for connection and reassurance. And so you might correlate these with things you might have heard or terms you might have heard like avoidant attachment or anxious attachment. We will get into those in future episodes, hopefully. Now, a fourth reason is that adolescents tend to make everything louder. So even when looking at the comparison point that I mentioned before, everybody compares themselves to others, but teens do it more intensely because our identities are still being shaped and developed. So there are developmental reasons why FOMO peaks in teenage years. And I guess this kind of boils down into three main factors. Our reward systems are extra sensitive, our emotional systems are fully active, but our regulation system, or the prefrontal cortex, is still developing. And this leads to a lack of impulse control, emotional regulation, and problem-solving skills, which all eventually contribute to this augmentation of this fear of missing out. Fifth and finally, a big factor that plays into the increase of this fear of missing out is social media and digital algorithms. So social media is a hub of content, as we know, and it's exceptional at displaying socially charged content. So the photos that look the most fun, the gatherings that appear the most exclusive, and the moments that seem most enviable. And these are handpicked, curated, and eventually plugged into our timelines. And this hyper-exposure to posts like these facilitates the creation of an ideal image. So what our social lives should look like, which is essentially a constant rush and overload of seeing them and meeting them and sitting with the right people and going to every event, or rather, overwhelm with everybody but yourself. Now, the impacts of FOMO are implied at times, but often underestimated in their severity, and I've summarized its effects into three key points. So, areas of life that it typically impacts the most, and the first being how it makes people disconnect from their actual livable lives. So you stop noticing what you're doing because you're focusing on what you're not doing. And rather than identifying areas of enjoyment, things that we can take advantage of, or things that we can seek joy from that are attainable and don't center on the needs or actions of others, You're seeking out ways that you can manipulate areas of other people's lives in order to cater to your own satisfaction. And this creates a sense of disconnect because you're avoiding areas of your life that focus on you. It also creates the illusion that you're always behind. So life basically starts to feel like a game with levels that you're not reaching. And this subsequently leads to burnout because you're consistently seeking this perceived rush that comes with feeling included, even in cases when you'd rather not be or shouldn't be. And finally, it triggers anxiety and stress and worsens behavioral problems because, like I said, it is a fear. So your body reacts as if there's a real threat happening, even if you're safe, which most of the time is the case. And if this is encouraged or persistent, it can even lead to depressive symptoms and weigh down self-esteem. You might constantly compare your life with the idealized lives that other people present, leading to the belief that you don't measure up socially or emotionally or in ways that can't really be recognized. And behaviorally, it might contribute to overcommitment, like I previously mentioned, saying yes to things that you don't necessarily want to or can say yes to, impulsivity, distraction or lack of concentration, and a neglectfulness when it comes to necessary habits like eating or sleeping. Now, fixes and solutions are easier said than done when it comes to implementation, but there are key actions that are important to take when it comes to struggling with something like a fear of missing out. And the one that I find to be most crucial and preliminary is developing self-awareness. So the first step of coping with FOMO involves some sort of self-exploration, and you want to consider what's driving your fear of missing out and what's consuming your attention and areas that you'd rather focus on outside of that. So you should identify what emotions and circumstances are pushing this FOMO. Maybe you're worried that your relationships will only survive if you continually share or engage with other people's posts. Or maybe you fear that you'll miss an invitation to an impromptu hangout or fall behind on news or gossip or inside jokes if you don't check social media or engage with hangouts with these people that you're thinking about at constant rates. And when doing so, you'll be able to identify how a lot of these driving circumstances are, as previously mentioned, centered around others or things that cannot be controlled. And here it's important to acknowledge that it's essential to reframe. It's also important to work on keeping your attention on your own experiences and not on other people's, and this is where the act of being present in the moment comes in, which is definitely something that can be worked on and developed like a skill. So immersing yourself in your senses and experiences, as well as being mindful of impulses or urges and mindless habits, are two ways that this can be done. So, for example, focusing on a sensory experience and eradicating unnecessary distractions, like, for instance, leaving your phone or screen while eating and focusing solely on the food, can contribute to training this muscle. It's also, easy to fall into the habit of mindlessly picking up your phone every few minutes. So the next time you want to check your phone, stop and resist the urge for a moment. Now, this is just an example of engaging with your senses and resisting these urges. And despite the fact that it isn't directly related to FOMO in wording, working on this skill will contribute a lot to the appreciation of experiences that you have on your own or with others, while other events that you may be missing out on are taking place simultaneously. The last thing that I wanted to mention was the importance of fostering genuine connections. So loneliness can make FOMO worse and vice versa. They reinforce each other and it's like a cycle because you're much more likely to experience FOMO when you're on your own rather than when you're with a group of friends or a group of people doing something. And fostering artificial friendships at higher quantities rather than deepening the connections with people that you already know can contribute to a lack of trust and understanding that would have repelled FOMO. So if you foster these artificial friendships and make many friends that you don't really know on a personal level, this will lead to an increased level of FOMO because you will be constantly aware of the fact that people that you know are with each other, doing something at social events, meeting each other, even while you're with a group of people that you have made yourself familiar with. That's why fostering these artificial friendships will never give you the social satisfaction or lack of worry that you need to escape from this FOMO. Fostering deeper connections with people that you already know and creating a solidified group of friends will allow you to increase this sense of trust and understanding, because you'd be more likely to understand motives and planning processes and accept them. And you'd be able to stay more present in the moment because you're aware that this is where you are, nothing else is happening, or nothing else as significant to you personally is happening. And you'd be able to embrace the connection more and forget about this fear that you might be missing out on other things, because those other things don't emotionally and socially and personally matter to you as much. To end, I think it's important to make clear that FOMO isn't really a flaw or a manifestation of drama or clinginess or hyperemotion. It's rather just a natural expression of human emotion because humans are innately social creatures. It's just important to acknowledge that you're allowed to miss things and that you will miss things because not everything is under your control. And so it's crucial that one learns to build a life that allows room for both social interaction and alone time, with no guilt or anxiousness, and to avoid unhealthy relationships with those around them and with themselves.